Hello and welcome to Good Day Street Talk. I'm Antwan Lewis. Here's what we're working on today, everybody, from climate change, political instability, even workplace and everyday life. Anxiety, that's what we're talking about, how it's impacting all of our stress levels. Global futurist, author, and TED Talk speaker Ari Wallach will be here to discuss how to best manage the long path ahead. Then later, the renowned Brooklyn Legacy Istitution 651 Arts is in the middle of a major expansion and reimagining. We're going to hear from the new executive director, Toya Lillard, about their big plans. But let's talk about this. Despite the current economic uncertainty, the needs of community and businesses in our state continue to rise. Now, the community development nonprofit LISC NY is expanding its statewide presence with a heavy presence on underinvested neighborhoods. Valerie White is its senior executive director. She's on the couch with us. Val, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
For those who may be unaware, what does LISC NY stand for and how'd you get started?
Well, LISC is the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We are actually a national nonprofit with offices in 38 markets across the U.S. We got started right here in New York in the South Bronx 42 years ago with funding from the Ford Foundation to support community development in a new way. How do you include the community in developing economic strength?
So now we're talking about investing in underinvested neighborhoods, not just in New York City, but statewide. The current economic climate, Val, we're up and down. Some would even say we're a little bit more down. So tell me about your role and the organization's role in trying to change that.
Again, we're a nonprofit and we're an intermediary, so we actually raise funds specifically to invest in disinvested communities to support marginalized populations. But everything we do is based on a platform of racial and economic equity. So we get social impact investors who help us invest in physical infrastructure, so that's commercial real estate, affordable housing, both rental and home ownership, health equity in terms of the physical parts of the community, but also support the nonprofits and the programmatic aspects that help build a strong community. So we're looking forward to spreading that across all of New York State.
So for 42 years, you all have been making an impact, in this area, your organization. We do know that a lot, even pre-COVID, a lot of attention was given to the needs that our communities of color were facing. How are you all helping those in specific as they try to bounce back from COVID and from the pandemic and all of that stuff?
Well, we started very immediately at the beginning of the pandemic, identifying what the gaps were in terms of service, health equity, jobs, increased infection rates, businesses of color in the communities like the South Bronx and East New York and Harlem and up in Western New York, east side of Buffalo. Okay. How can we provide that type of help? So it ranged from continuing to support the building of infrastructure, but also grants to small businesses. How do we keep these businesses in business so that they can provide that economic base in these neighborhoods for the residents of these communities?
As you're trying to affect that, given what we're talking about, the basis of our discussion, the current economic climate right now, how tough is it for you to go and get the funds to help redirect to these and underserved, disinvested communities?
Well, we were very lucky in 2020. As you remember, a lot of large corporations talked about investing in communities to support what was happening in these communities because they were much more negatively impacted by COVID. So we were able to take those funds, create funds, and leverage them with government dollars as well as public dollars, and then continue to loan out money as well as grant out money. And the lending out of that money provides, additional funding so that we can support other activities. So it's actually really planning accordingly and leveraging the funding from our partners. And we have a number of partners that are still very generous to us at LISC New York in both markets, New York and Western New York.
You mentioned Western New York, you mentioned Buffalo, and we all are aware of the tragedy that went and took place there at the grocery store at Tops. What role did you all play in trying to help Buffalo get back on its feet, which they're still wobbly?
Yes, and we're very active in that market. So one of the first things that we did is we stood up a fund called the Soil Fund, and that fund was basically to support Black-run nonprofits as well as Black small businesses in the neighborhood who were filling service gaps that were left when the Tops had to close down. Now, of course, we know Tops has still opened up, but all of the services that one central place was providing to that community are not all there. For instance, people went there for groceries, but they also went there for blood pressure checks,
right,
for their pharmaceuticals, to cash checks. And now you have a community where 1 in 3 people have a car and limited public transportation that can't do all of the activities in that one center. So with our fund, we're supporting small businesses and nonprofits that are providing that gap support so that the folks in the community can still get a ride to get their pharmaceutical needs met, in particular elderly and disabled, or go somewhere to you know, have their checks cashed. We're also working with some of our financial partners where there have been branches opened up to ensure that there is access to banking and other opportunities right there.
If someone were to say to you, Valerie, what is the biggest need for our communities of color or disinvested, you know, I like your term, communities, how would you answer that question?
It's the building of generational wealth. And what that means is understanding in our communities, how do we build that, particularly Black and brown communities. And that is put forth through ownership, whether it's home ownership or business ownership. It's put forth through workforce development in careers of the future and careers that have the opportunity to grow wealth. And just investing in the community. So that education plus the removal of systemic barriers to equity that have been part of these communities, basically, well, part of our culture, right,
yes,
our country for 400 years, understanding what they are in each community, providing the support for ownership and wealth generation and wealth building, and that's the biggest need that we see.
Anyone looking for more information about LISC NY, where should they go?
Well, they can reach us on our social media platform. We are on LinkedIn as well as Facebook at LISC NYC at this point, but we'll be changing that over the course of a few months, which will include both our markets. We also have a website, www.lisc.org/NYC. And there, any information about programs that we're offering, our position on advocacy, which we do quite a bit on policy advocacy, our writings, you know, opportunity for funding is all on our website and in our social media platform.
Valerie White, so nice to meet you again in person and not through
yes,
Zoom from 2 years ago. Stay right there for a second. All right, everybody, coming up next, global futurist and TED Talk speaker Ari Wallach will be here discussing managing megatrends. Now, that's the word that I just learned about, but we want to share it with you when we come back. We are back. Our next guest says that our global society is facing anxiety triggers across all kinds of daily spectrums. Now, these spectrums will continue to grow, and our response now will impact future generations. Okay, a lot to unpack here, but helping with that luggage, global futurist Ari Wallach, who joins us virtually. Ari, good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
So for people who may not know what a global futurist is, what exactly is that?
So folks like me are kind of classically trained at the intersection of history, political science, and economics. And what we do is we basically are constantly kind of scanning the environment. We're looking both at trends and at mega trends, which are these kind of large macro global forces that have been around probably for several decades and will very much impact business, society, and the way we live. So as a futurist, we're brought into organizations like the State Department, the White House, the Pentagon, corporations, to help them not just kind of think about tomorrow, but how can they plan? How can they take kind of action, not just to have the future wash over them, but really kind of shape what tomorrow will look, feel, and be like?
So we're talking about anxiety triggers. Now, do you feel that the world is changing so incredibly fast that we're pretty much not equipped to deal with such a radical pace?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the world has been changing in many ways, probably since the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago. But now with technology, we are seeing the rise in kind of exponential change. And what that's forcing us to do is really think about what it is that we want to be moving forward as a species, which I know sounds kind of grandiose. But in the day-to-day, what that speed does is it kind of amplifies our short-term tendencies, right? So short-termism in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's been with us for probably hundreds of thousands of years, and we needed it if we were being chased by a large-toothed animal. But now change is happening at such a rapid pace that it amplifies our anxieties. And what we do is we basically fall back on that short-term thinking, which again, sometimes is good in kind of emergency situations. But at this current point in time for society, we need to be able to think kind of bigger and longer about the world that we want to be leaving to our great-great-grandchildren.
All right, so now we've got a list of issues and triggers, if you will, and I want to make sure we get through them because these are very interesting. The first one I want you to weigh in on is climate-based migration.
Sure. So we've been working with a lot of different organizations, and one of the biggest ones, obviously, is climate-based migration. Now, when we think of it, we tend to think maybe in the Horn of Africa or in parts of Asia. But the reality is, and we see this right now, as we have kind of amplifying heat waves across the U.S. Southwest, we should be really thinking about what is it going to mean for tens of millions of Americans to actually start migrating more north. And so the ramifications of this is how do Midwestern cities like Chicago or even on the East Coast in New York prepare for what could be millions of people, of Americans, having to migrate up to kind of higher, cooler regions. So we tend to think of this as kind of a global or in the developing South issue, but this is a mega trend that's very much going to impact those of us here living in the United States.
So let's talk about the decline of traditional religious groups and organizations. That's interesting.
Yeah, so we've been seeing this. So we actually did work with Pew Research, and they do the famous Pew poll. And the fastest growing cohort in America when they were asked about their religious preferences was actually none of the above, the NONES. But the fact of the matter is people are still seeking community. They're still seeking a connection to something larger. So what we're starting to see in major cities like New York and Chicago, Seattle, basically across the United States, is less people are actually going to formal church or synagogue or mosque. Now, what that means is we have a lot of real estate and a lot of buildings. So we're starting to see some of these actual old churches and kind of religious infrastructure, if you will, convert to co-working or to exercise or different kind of ways that people come together outside of the kind of classical theological way of being. Now, it's interesting, this actually even impacts politics and how politicians think about how they get their message out. So it used to be you went to a church on a Sunday morning and you were kind of a guest speaker. Right. And now we're starting to see politicians going to yoga classes in what used to be very large churches in large cities.
Interesting. Okay, this one confuses me. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Okay, cryptoverse and that whole crypto financial culture as opposed to perhaps the decline of your more traditional and institutional ones like your banks and things like that. Where are we with things now with that?
Yeah. So I gave a talk to the New York Fed not that long ago. And so when we think of kind of, especially in New York City, if we think about it being kind of the financial capital of the world, that really kind of clusters in lower Manhattan and obviously in parts of Midtown. Now we're seeing people trading millions, if not billions of dollars a day, basically from their home. The whole idea that you need to have a kind of centralized banking infrastructure, it's still very much there. Your ATM or your classic bank isn't going away now. But what's happening is the idea that people used to have to live to work in the finance industry and be kind of clustered geographically in a dense way to get together is kind of going away. And so you're seeing kind of crypto, this rise of Bitcoin and alternative investment assets, really how it's going to impact specifically New York City. In some ways, it's something as silly as real estate, right? Where people live, they no longer have to be seeing each other basically at the office anymore. And so this starts to actually just change everything just in terms of how we live in a city together.
Let me ask you about this one. Urbanization and the density that could possibly impact suburbs outside of New York City.
Yeah, so I actually live just north of New York City in a nice little suburb. No building is over 4 stories. Now, what's going to start happening as all these people start kind of moving north, as we talked about, and just in general population growth, what we're going to find is these kind of smaller towns are going to start changing their zoning, right? So in my town, again, not very high in terms of how much we build, we're going to start seeing 15, 20-story buildings. And what this will start to look like, instead of the kind of classic midtown with lower level suburbs, we're going to start seeing things that look a little bit more like Tokyo, where you have 20 million people, high rises all the way out to the edges. Because the fact of the matter is, that's what people want to do. They want to congregate together. There's more economic activity, and we're going to see kind of a movement out of a kind of a rural way of, basically living into the much denser urbanization that is much larger than anything that we've known, especially in North America in the past 100 years.
Okay, now this one I'm still trying to adjust to. I have Alexa, and my phone does OK Google, but let's talk about ubiquitous or artificial intelligence. Is this only going to continue to advance?
This is going to continue to advance. Now, the fact of the matter, like all mega trends, they can be both good and bad. It's what we do with them and how we kind of operational execute against the mega trends. Now, again, I have microphones kind of throughout my house, and it's nice. But the fact of the matter is a lot of what we do day in and day out is going to start being offloaded basically to machines. So the reason ubiquitous intelligence is good is because it frees us up. The reason it's potentially bad or there's issues is a lot of what it frees up is actually people's jobs. So from a political or even a sociological point of view, we have to start thinking, what are we going to do with tens, if not hundreds, if not millions of people whose jobs are actually going away because a lot of what they did is now handled by machines? So again, good for some of us, bad for others. The key is that we actually work together to find a way that allows everyone to kind of have a maximum flourishing and free time and not be out of a job.
Okay. Have you ever seen the movie Logan's Run?
I've seen Logan's Run, yes.
Just saying. Anyway, tell us about your book, Long Path.
So the book is called Long Path, Becoming the Great Ancestors Our Future Needs. And really what the book is about is kind of flipping the script. It's a how to navigate this moment, what I call an intertitle in the book, which is kind of, we're in between the ways that we used to do stuff over the past couple hundred years and the ways we're going to do stuff. And in this intertitle moment, we need a new mindset. We need a new way of thinking that's flexible and agile and takes into account these megatrends. And also, and perhaps more importantly, realizing that what we do today is going to set up future generations, right? Even the small decisions that we make reverberate throughout time. So again, the book is about not necessarily thinking about your ancestors and what it means to be a descendant, but again, flipping that and thinking, wait a second, I could be a great ancestor. Generations from now, they're going to look back on me and say, what kind of decisions did you make? So the book is kind of helping us realize that we're in this moment and how to work within it so we can kind of come out on the other side as successfully as possible.
What's your website, Ari?
www.longpath.org. You can follow us on social, obviously at Long Path. You can buy the book through there. It's available everywhere. If you can, and if you're able to, please shop local. Go to your local bookstores, especially New York. There's so many of them, and they would love the business.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Stay safe. Up next, everybody, remaking a well-known Brooklyn Legacy Institution, 651 Arts, and Toya Lillard is here to tell us what's going on there. There she is. So after joining the renowned Brooklyn Legacy Institution, 651 Arts as interim executive director this past May, seasoned arts leader Toya Lillard has been now named to the position permanently, and she's joining us now to tell us about the big plans moving forward. Congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
All right, now for those who may not be familiar with 651 Arts, why don't you quickly just tell us what it is?
Sure. 651 Arts is a 34-year-old legacy arts institution born in Brooklyn, New York, dedicated to uplifting and expanding African diasporic arts. That means that over 34 years, we've worked with some of the most well-known artists in the world, as well as incubated some artists that became well-known over the past 34 years. And we're really excited to move into a new space in March of 2023, the first ever space that the institution has had, and to begin to continue to support artists and the arts ecosystems in Brooklyn and beyond.
I like how you use the word incubated. That was a really nice way of saying homegrown, nurtured,
right.
and brought forth. And we love that in New York. Where will the space be?
The space will be at 10 Lafayette, which is in the cultural hub of downtown Brooklyn, right in the BAM Cultural District. We are excited to be in partnership with Brooklyn Public Library and Mokata. We have 2 floors, 12,500 square feet of space, which includes a state-of-the-art black box theater, 3 studios, including a media studio. And as a part of our presence in this cultural hub, we want to be able to help young artists, right, with subsidized rentals, with space to perform and to, again, incubate their art. We know that during COVID-19, there was a dearth of opportunities for artists to create, produce, and perform. And we want to say we're here, we're excited to have a home, and it's their home as well.
We also know that part of the new transition and relocation would be you all are reimagining things there. So tell us about some of the vision moving forward that when we go, we'll be able to see.
Well, the upcoming season is themed liminal spaces. Liminal representing the in-between, the transition that we're all in coming out of and still in a pandemic.
Right.
But artistically, that is the place where art can be creative, and is generative. So a liminal space, particularly for Black folks and Black art, is a good thing. And we're excited to be able to partner with some organizations like Weeksville Heritage Center, the Center for Fiction, to bring back to the stage some artists that we've been missing, and also to highlight some newer artists that you may not know about. So again, really wanting our space to be home, not just for our institution, but for a community of artists in Brooklyn and beyond. We're very excited.
You're celebrating the diversity of a diaspora that's just, it's so long, so wide. Is it tough to make decisions when you're trying to decide, okay, do we want to highlight this, or what goes into that process? Because that all falls on your desk, and I don't envy you.
I know. I get that question a lot. I am a very community-minded individual. I grew up in Houston, Texas, steeped like a tea bag in the arts. Shout out to my aunt Eileen Morris, the artistic director of the Ensemble Theater there.
Hi, Aunt Eileen.
Hi, Aunt Eileen. And we, in the art-making process, are community-minded. So I am not making a decision in a vacuum. I'm asking the artists that we hope to invite into this space, what do you need? What do you envision? Our stakeholders are really important to us and have been important to us. We have 34 years worth of stakeholders. The institution has been led by powerful women like Anna Glass, Maureen Knighton, Mickey Shepard, Shay Wafer. Shout out to Mama Shay. And so we want to really uplift that legacy and let people know that it's been there and we've been there, but also look forward to this new generation of artists.
Look at how hard you're smiling. Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
Telling everybody about that. Stay right there for a minute. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. For all of us here at Fox 5, I'm Antwan Lewis. We thank you so much for the company. We'll see you next time for more Street Talk.